We are 5 weeks into the season, and it is painfully obvious who the best team in the NFL is. You see, I just finished watching the Dallas Cowboys head to Santa Clara to face off against the San Francisco 49ers on a Sunday night game. Yes, this was prime time. It was built up even before the season began. This matchup was built up. And honestly, going into this game, both teams lived up to the hype. I mean, the 49ers were 4-0. And the Cowboys were 3-1. Now you might hear some Niners fans or just Cowboys haters in general argue that the 3-1 record that the Cowboys had leading up to week 5 was a bit misleading. And yeah, they might be right if you consider the competition they played, but let's be real, even great teams lose. Except the 1972 Dolphins, every other team that has ever played in the NFL has lost a game in their season. So, good teams lose to bad ones every once in a while. So the fact that the Cowboys were able to take care of business and do it efficiently and effectively early on, that's kind of impressive. I am more than willing to give flowers where flowers are due. Now, sure, did the Cowboys beat two teams who are now 1-4? Maybe, but it isn't their fault that the Giants and Patriots season didn't start the way that they wanted it to. And, maybe the Jets didn't have Aaron Rodgers when they played the Cowboys. But again, that's nothing the Cowboys could do there. But enough about them. Let's talk about who we're really here for. The best team in the States, the San Francisco 49ers. Now, if you're new to the channel, you're probably unaware of the fact that I did make a video talking about these 49ers just a year ago around Christmas time. And to sum it up for you, the main topic of conversation was that I believe the 49ers could be the best team in the NFL if Brock Purdy is the superstar that I think he can be. And at the time, it was kind of a risky comment to make because he had only started in 3 games. But in those 3 games, he looked fantastic, like one of the best players I've ever seen. And yeah, you could argue the system around him is just flawless, which it was. I mean, he had weapons left and right. Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, CMC, more than I could remember, more than I can list. And he's got one of the best offensive-minded coaches in the game in Kyle Shanahan. So the offensive system that Brock Purdy was thrown into, it was pretty easy, not easy, but it was not too hard to succeed in. Of course, just because it isn't too hard doesn't mean everybody can do it. Trey Lance, did he get a lot of chances? No, but he didn't look like Brock Purdy when he was in there. I mean, when Brock Purdy is under center, he takes this already explosive and dynamic offense to an entirely new level. A level above what Jimmy Garoppolo was able to do with this team. 2 levels above what Trey Lance was able to do with this team. Because he's a great quarterback who just so happened to fall into the perfect circumstance. And let me tell you, that almost never happens in a business like the NFL. But it happened for Brock Purdy, and here we are. And honestly, looking back at the video from a year ago, my prediction about calling him a future superstar was pretty spot on. I mean, he has gone on to not lose a single regular season game in his career so far, and the only game he's ever lost was because he couldn't finish it. And that was the playoff game, I want to say the NFC Championship game last year versus the Philadelphia Eagles, where one could argue the Niners were probably going to run away with it if Purdy's arm didn't just die on him. But that's not the timeline we're living in. The timeline we're living in is the one where Brock Purdy and the 49ers lose the NFC Championship game, and this core goes another year without winning a ring. The Niners have arguably had one of the best teams in the NFL for the past 3, 4, 5 seasons now, and they haven't been able to reach the mountaintop. And one has to wonder, how much longer can they run the team the way they're running it? Because eventually, Brock Purdy, this Mr. Irrelevant man, is going to need his contract. He's going to need a new contract. This guy is making breadcrumbs currently just because of where he was drafted. And soon, that won't be the reality that the 49ers are living in. I mean, the way Brock Purdy's played for this team, he is going to get a massive contract, especially because he hasn't gotten paid early into his career. So, the 49ers could go the route of paying the man or they can decide our system is so fantastic, we want to keep all these core players around, so we're just going to bring in another young, cheap QB to run this offense, which they could do. I could see both possibilities, both scenarios playing out realistically, but I'm not in the mind of the 49ers front office, so I can't really tell you with 100% certainty what they're going to do. All I can tell you is how Brock Purdy's played so far. I mean, if we take a look at his numbers here, he goes every week throwing a touchdown pass. And since the day he got the job back in December of last season, he's only gone one game without a touchdown pass, and that was this season versus the LA Rams. That didn't matter though, because they cooked the Rams. They cooked the Rams 30-23. Brock Purdy didn't even need to throw a touchdown there. What he did do, however, was throw for 200 plus passing yards, had a 68% completion percentage, and have a higher QB rating than some of your favorite guys, alright? And that was his lowest QB rating since his first start versus the Miami Dolphins. Now, I mean, the Dolphins game, that was the first time he had ever stepped onto an NFL field as the starter. He did have a slip up as an interception, but, you know, they slapped the Miami team around 33-17. And as we know, the Miami Dolphins were fantastic last year when Tua was playing. I don't even know if Tua played in this game. I know Purdy played in that game, and he was badass. In fact, he rode that momentum all the way to Tampa Bay the following weekend, smacked Tom Brady, yes, the Tom Brady, in his retirement age, and, you know, he would go on to win important key games against divisional rivals. One against Seattle, one against the Rams, one against the Cardinals, beat every single one of them. In fact, the closest one was probably the Rams, who almost had him for a second, but they lost it. Brock Purdy's beaten them twice. He's 2-0 versus them in his career. Sorry, but he's got your number, Matthew Stafford. You know, I'm sorry, it's Brock Purdy. There's nothing you can do about it. In fact, there's nothing anyone can or has done about it, because Brock Purdy's undefeated, as mentioned several times to this point, and it hasn't been more obvious than after tonight's game versus the Dallas Cowboys. The Dallas Cowboys were supposed to be this formidable opponent that, you know, we're supposed to keep the Niners in check. They had a really good defense heading into this game. Unfortunately, they lost Trayvon Diggs earlier in the season, but the overall defense for the Cowboys was still really good. Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb are a dynamic duo. Tony Pollard, a fantastic running back. They have the pieces to be one of the best teams in the NFC, and when they matched up against the best team in the NFL, it wasn't close. 42-10? 42-10, ridiculous. I mean, if you ask me, those are some Madden numbers right there. Hell, not even online Madden, because if it got to a point where it was 42-10, your opponent would quit. They would go and they would exit out of the game. They'd leave it early because they couldn't stand being blown out that heavily. And honestly, the same was true for the damn, you know, Dallas Cowboys. Dak Prescott sucks. Does he? I don't know. He throws a lot of picks. He has a lot of turnovers. He said he was going to fix it. He hasn't. We are 5 games into the season. They're 3-2, and they've got more questions than answers at this point. Thank you, 49ers, by the way, for that, because now America's team is in shambles, bro. Dak Prescott needs to go for the next week and a half until they play their next game. That's how long we're going to hear about it. So, you know, that is a downside to them losing. But also, you know, the 49ers, they're dominant. The only team that could possibly beat them, arguably, in the NFC is the Eagles, who took them out last year. Honestly, the Eagles are 5-0, Niners are 5-0. The Eagles did get slightly worse in the offseason just because they lost so much talent, but they also regained it through the draft somehow. I mean, Jalen Carter, of all people, fell into the Eagles' lap, so they were just able to kind of like recycle the defense in a sense. They're not as good, but, you know, they could have fallen off harder. And then there's the reigning Super Bowl champs, the Kansas City Chiefs. They're obviously going to be a threat, but the Niners look unstoppable. They look like Thanos during Infinity War. Anyway, that's about it for this video. I just wanted to hype up the Niners, hype up Brock Purdy because they're playing fantastic, give my flowers where they're due, and plus the Niners always get a ton of views, so, you know, why not talk about it. Catch y'all later. Much love. Deuces.